Welcome to the May 2023 webinar. My name is Natalie, and today Anne and I will present Orchid EFT processing for Sage Intacct, focusing on support for AR customer payments and tips when using EFT for Sage Intacct. Orchid launched EFT processing for Sage Intacct at the end of 2022, and since January 2023, EFT processing has been supporting AP payments, including AP advances. New in May 2023, we will very shortly release support for EFT file creation for AR payments to create direct debit files. So today we will demonstrate how to configure and use EFT processing with AR customer payments. We will also share tips when using EFT processing with Sage Intacct based on common support questions we have received in the last few months. And most of the tips apply to both EFT for AP and AR, looking at using some Sage Intacct features and processing rules, working with different types of EFT files and processing, including pre-notes and positive pay files, looking at some security roles in EFT and in Sage Intacct. So now I will hand over to Anne for a quick start on using EFT processing for AR customer payments.
My name's Anne from Orchid Systems, and in this presentation I'm going to run through a quick start guide for EFT processing for Sage Intacct, focusing on customer payments. EFT processing allows you to streamline Sage Intacct payment processing. It allows you to create an EFT payment and direct debit file in the format required by your bank. It's integrated with the Sage Intacct payment and receipt processing routines. It supports over 800 bank formats from over 80 countries around the world, and others are created on request. It supports domestic payments, cross-border payments, positive pay, wire payments, NACHA, CPA 005, SEPA, ISO 2022, BPay, etc. It also supports user-definable formats. The EFT banking details for the vendors, customers, and banks themselves are held by EFT processing within Sage Intacct. And it supports user-definable screen labels to reflect the bank terminology for this data. What we're going to go through in this quick start video is to install and configure EFT processing. We're going to download and install and activate EFT processing, enter the license, configure the EFT formats required, configure the banks required, configure the EFT customers, and then create an EFT file. To download the Orchid EFT application, you need to first go to our website, orchid.systems, and log in as a partner. The product downloads are in the partner area. Then select Sage Intacct and then download the module. And once you download the module, you can then unzip the XML file from the file that you've just downloaded. And this XML file is the file that you would import from Platform Services, and then you would import that particular XML file. Select the file and click Install. And after importing the XML file for the first time or doing a product update, you should always disconnect from your system and re-log in again to allow those pages to be refreshed. And before we go ahead to do the configuration, we should check the other prerequisites after importing the XML file. So in the help, in the topic importing the XML file, you download and save the XML file, import it, and then you need to make sure you have an Ajax web service user. So you go to the company setup, company, from the main Sage Intacct menu, and then select the security tab and scroll down to find web service authorizations and make sure you have an Ajax user. After installing the Orchid EFT application, the following role will be created for you. And then you need to go to the relevant users and assign this role to all the users who need access to EFT processing. And you do this by selecting the user, editing the user, and on the Roles tab, you would assign the role to that particular user. So here we have assigned the Orchid module to the user Anne. And after assigning the role to the appropriate users, you will have Orchid EFT under your applications list and also in your menus, and you can drag the Orchid EFT menu to where you want to work with that. And you also have an overview menu. The next thing to do is to enter your activation code in the EFT license screen. You can apply for as many activation codes as you need for all your different company IDs, either demonstration accounts or your customers' accounts or the customers' implementation accounts. Without the activation code, you can still do all the setup, but you cannot generate an EFT file or download an EFT file. All screens in the Orchid EFT application have a help menu, and when you click on it, you will get more information about the screen. And the help shows you where the company ID displayed on the Orchid EFT license screen comes from. And it's this which you need to send to Orchid to get an activation code for your demo accounts or your customer's account or your customer's implementation account. The EFT license screen also shows you when this license is due to expire and if there are any updates to the EFT application on the Orchid website, which you may wish to download and re-import through the Install application on the Platform Services menu. You use the EFT format screen to maintain all the different EFT formats that you need for all your different bank accounts. To create a new format, click Add, and then you would paste in the format definition from the text file that we send you. In future, we will have a button here so you can automatically download that bank file from our website. But in the short term, you need to send us the specification that you need from the bank, and then we'll send you the associated format that you can paste in here. And in the meantime, if you go to the knowledge base on our website, you'll be able to find the knowledge base article in the Sage Intacct area on our website, which has some sample EFT file formats for you to get started. So it tells you how to paste it in, and it's got a few attachments for the Australian ABA, the Canadian CPA 005, the NACHA, and the SEPA or ISO 2022 for European and Asian banks. Once you have the file, you can copy and paste the contents into the EFT file format screen. So this is the CAN CPA 005, and we would paste that across into the Orchid Systems EFT format screen. So you can paste the entire contents into the format box and then set the name equal to the characters in the square brackets for the text and the description from the name in the quotes. In this case, the Canadian CPA standard CPA 005, the 1464 byte format. And because I've already got a CPA 005, I'm just going to call this one _demo, and then you'd save that format. And after setting up all the EFT file formats that you'd need, you would then go and associate the file format with the appropriate bank. The reason why you can have multiple file formats associated with one bank is you may be doing wire transfers, domestic payments, cross-border payments, and positive pay all from the same bank account. So you need to be able to select multiple file formats for a bank account. And as well as associating different formats to the bank for your different payment types, you can also select different formats for the different receipt types or AR payment types. So in this case, from bank account 100 CHK, we're going to be creating the CAN TD format for our AR receipts. And once you select the EFT format, you would fill in the associated fields that are required for the bank from the bank's reference point of view. And using another format as an example, you can get help text by that little black eye being highlighted, which is included in the EFT file format and helps you fill in the details required. You can predetermine what the file name is going to be called, and in this case, check the help for the different codes that you can use in your file format name. YYY gives you the year, MM gives you the month, DD gives you the day, and S gives you a serial number. And once you've filled in the bank-specific info for this particular file format, you'd go ahead and save the record. For more information on the EFT banks, you can click on the help. And this has more information on the fields you can use in the file name and the other fields on that screen. And after associating our receipt format, CAN-TD, with our 100 CHK bank account, we would go and configure those customers that we're going to do direct debits from that bank account using that format. So we would go to our Accounts Receivable customers, and for those customers that we're going to direct debit, on the Orchid EFT tab, we would select the CAN-DD format, and then we would fill in the details as are required. So for our CPA transaction code, we would need to fill in the associated code, and if you create yourself an EFT details view, including fields such as the bank branch number, the bank account name, the account number, and the BIC or IBAN fields, the EFT file format, it makes it easier when you're checking that your customers have been set up correctly. You can also export your customers, having configured one of your customers for EFT details, and create an import template and import those details back in. And see our help for a tip on how to create the export file. And that's it. We have now configured our Sage Intacct instance for EFT processing for AR payments. Now you would go ahead to create the EFT file. The first step to create an EFT direct debit file in Sage Intacct is to use the Sage Intacct AR payment processing routines to create and post your AR payments and your AR advances. And once these documents are posted, you are able to use the EFT AR payment request screen to select those payments and generate an EFT file. You would then use the EFT file list screen to download the EFT file, and once that file had been uploaded into the bank software and confirmed by the bank, you would come back and confirm the EFT file. And this is the process I'm now going to show you. EFT processing allows you to create direct debit files for your bank based on your accounts receivable posted payments. So based on posted payments, whether they're advance payments or straightforward payments, these posted payments are able to be selected for an EFT file. And on the EFT menu, you can use the EFT AR payment requests to show you all those payments which have been posted for a bank account that's configured for EFT, for a customer that's configured for EFT, and which have not yet been included in an EFT file. So we are able to use these filters to view the payments that you want to see. If you want to see payments that have already been made, and you can look at included in an EFT file, you can see these payments have already been included in an EFT file. but not included in an EFT file based on my filter range. I have these handful of payments that I can format for a EFT file. I could select all or just select a handful. And if I select across multiple EFT file types, multiple files would be created. In this case, I'm just going to select these two payments for the CAN TD format and click Generate. So EFT processing has created me one file, and now those two payments will drop off this list as they have now been included in a file, and we would see them on this list. So we can see that these two payments have now been included in the file 10123. And on the EFT file list, I would see the new EFT bank file with the status of new, including the two payments. I can click on View to view that, and I see the two payments. Clicking on this plus sign, I would see the individual records for the individual customers, all their details, the check number, and the customer's banking details, as well as the banking details for our own bank. I can also go to the EFT bank record if I need to see the details there, or to the format record if I need to see the details there. But assuming I'm happy with the view, I could then download. And EFT processing will download the file and name it based on your rules that you set up on the EFT bank record. So it's called EFT-AR with today's date and a sequence number. And if we open up that file, we can see it has been formatted based on the direct debit file required by the TD Bank. And now I would take that file and upload it to the bank. And when the bank confirms it's okay, I would come back here and click Confirm. And the status, which is currently exported, because I've downloaded it, will become confirmed. And that's the process for creating EFT files for your accounts receivable payments or your direct debits. You enter, approve, and post your AR payments and advance payments, and then you use the EFT AR payment request screen to select the payments for customers that are configured for EFT and banks that are configured for EFT, and generate the EFT file. And then using the EFT file list, you download the EFT file. You use your banking software to import or upload the file, and then when the bank confirms that that file was successful, you would come back and confirm the EFT file. Once you have imported or uploaded the EFT file into the bank software, and the bank says there's an issue with the file, for example, the payment date is in the past or one of the customer's bank account details was invalid, then you would, instead of confirming the file, you hold the file, and then once the file is held, the status will be on hold, and you are able to go back to the EFT bank or the customer's EFT details and change those, and then you would come back and refresh the file. And refresh will create you a new file with the new details in, and a history file of the old details and an audit trail of what has happened. But for the new file, you could then download it and upload it to the bank, and depending whether it was successful or not, either confirm or come back round and hold again. I'm now going to go ahead and show you this process. So once the file has been uploaded to the bank, if it's not successful, we will click Hold on the EFT file list for that particular file. We'll go and amend the EFT bank details or the EFT customer details, refresh the file, and then re-download that file. If we go back to our EFT file list and look at this particular file here, the status is exported. This means the file has already been downloaded. So instead of coming to confirm the file, we will hold the file because the bank's told us something's wrong with that particular file. So when we click hold, the status becomes on hold. And now we're able to go back to the EFT bank or to the customer's record and change some of the EFT details. And then we can come back and click refresh. If we click refresh now, it's going to say the details have not changed, so it's not going to create us a new file. So let's go ahead and change something on the EFT bank record. So in this case, the bank has told us that the client ID is not correct. So once we've updated some of the details that are included in the file, back on our EFT files, we can click refresh. And refresh will create us a new EFT file with the new details. And the old file will still be there as a history. So here we have the new file for that one payment. We can go ahead and view the details and download, etc. But we also have the linked history file. So when we click on the history, we see that this file was replaced. So file 10127 was replaced by file 10135. And we could go and view those details. That's all we can do. But we've got an audit trail that Sheena initially created that file, and it's now been replaced by Anne's file. So now we could view the details, either the bank or the vendor's details. And go ahead and download. And now that we've downloaded it, the status has become exported, and we are able to view this file here if we need to, or just confirm. Or if there was another issue, we could hold, fix the issue, refresh, and re-download again. So we've now seen how to process an EFT file if there's an issue in the file and we want to regenerate the file and send it to the bank.
Thanks, Anne. It's great to see EFT processing now supporting our customer payments. And if you're familiar with EFT for AP, you should be ready to use the familiar processes with AR very quickly. In the second part of this presentation, we will share some tips for EFT processing for Sage Intacct, and they generally apply to both AP and AR payments. We'll look at using some standard Sage Intacct features and how they fit into with EFT, looking at different file types such as pre-note, positive pay, how to use effective date when generating the file, look at some security roles in EFT and Intacct. So back to Anne for the second part of the presentation.
Thanks, Natalie. In this next section of the webinar, I'm going to run through some tips for implementing EFT processing. Some Intacct features that we can use to speed up and improve the EFT process. Some Intacct processing that we need to do in terms of producing the files that we want. How to make sure your payments are on the EFT AP or EFT AR payment request screen. We'll run through a couple of the special file types like positive pay and pre-notes, and how to work with effective date when your payment date recorded in Sage Intacct AR or AP is not correct. We'll also look at the security roles needed, both within EFT and within Sage Intacct. First, let's have a look at a few of the Intacct features that we can use to help with our Sage Intacct EFT processing and EFT navigation. In Sage Intacct, both for your accounts payable vendors as well as your accounts receivable customers, we recommend you create an EFT detail view and include in that the main columns that you'll be using for EFT processing. So it's easy to see on the vendor inquiry which vendors have been configured correctly. You can also drag and drop the Orchid EFT menu to a suitable position for you where it's useful and close to the module that you are working with. And you can add the Orchid EFT options to your favorites. So if you're really only using AP payment requests and EFT file lists, you can add them to your favorites, and then they'll be in your favorites for easy accessibility. Next, I'm going to cover off some Sage Intacct processing tips. We are often asked if you can import the EFT details for AP vendors and AR customers. And yes, you can. You can import the details for both customers and vendors. First, we recommend you set up a single vendor and customer, and then export a template, and then delete the columns you don't want, and then use that Excel spreadsheet as a template for the data entry, or copy and paste from the source where you've got the AP vendors or the AR customers' bank account details, and then import them back in. And this is described in the online help in this article. We are also asked if we can keep multiple bank account details for both vendors and customers. For example, the vendor requests a different bank account detail is used per product group that you purchase or per state that they're in, or the customer requests that 60% of the direct debit is taken from account 1 and the remainder from account 2. Because in Sage Intacct, when you make the payment, you associate it with a vendor or a customer code. There's no remit to or ship to code on the AP vendors and AR customers that we could associate a different EFT bank account details with. What you need to do is create two vendor codes or two customer codes and associate them through the parent account. And in the online help, we describe this process for accounts payable. The next question I'm going to address is, why is my payment not on the EFT AP and the AR payment request list? So as a reminder, the AP payment process is you create and approve and post AP payments, either using Pay Now or the Outbox, and then click Pay, the standard Intacct process. And those payments need to be approved and posted. And if you're doing checks and you're creating a positive pay, you need to still print the checks so they get posted. And for this payment to be shown on the AP payment request screen, the AP vendor needs to be configured for EFT processing. That is, you need to select an EFT format against the AP vendor and then fill in the required details. And similarly, for the AR receipt process, you need to receive an AR payment or advance, the standard Intacct process. It needs to be posted, and the AR customer needs to be configured for EFT processing. The EFT format needs to be selected against the relevant customer. And you may have a case on the EFT, AP, or AR payment requests that the file format is crossed out or scored out on the list. And this means you have not created or associated that particular file format with the EFT bank. You need to go to EFT Banks and create that record and fill in the associated bank details that you need for that file format. We're now going to take a look at some of the special EFT file types that you may need to produce. We're going to look at how do you create positive pay files and pre-note files. And you can refer to the associated knowledge base articles for the PowerPoint presentation and full demonstration of creating these EFT file types. In this video, I'm going to run through why you need a positive pay file, what a positive pay file is, and when you need to produce it. Positive pay is a process of validating or confirming the key details of checks to deter check fraud. A positive pay EFT file contains all the information printed on the check. It includes the payee's name, the account number, the check number, the transaction code, the check amount, the check date. And banks use this positive pay file to match the details electronically with the check being presented to the bank. Prior to the check being presented to the bank for payment, the bank needs to process the positive pay EFT file so they can honor the check. How do you create a positive pay file? First, you would configure the appropriate EFT file format on the AP vendor on the Orchid EFT tab. So you'd select the file format type and then fill in the details accordingly. And you would use EFT banks to associate the appropriate bank account with the EFT file format. Then you would go ahead and create your AP payments. Create, approve, print and post the checks. And then using the EFT AP payment requests, you'll be able to select the payments for the positive pay EFT file and then click generate the EFT file. And then on the EFT file screen, you would first download the EFT file and upload it to the bank. And when the bank confirms that the file has been uploaded correctly, you would then click confirm on the EFT files. Now we'll have a look at the process required for pre-note files and why you may need pre-note files. Many banks and also the NACHA, the National Automated Clearing House, which enables automated clearinghouse or ACH payments, require account verification as part of the anti-fraud efforts and initiatives. NACHA's web debit account validation rule went into effect on the 19th of March 2021 and became enforceable on the 19th of March 2022. And many other financial institutions have implemented similar rules. There are a number of compliance methods to meet the web debit account validation rules from NACHA and similar rules from other banks. The pre-note authorization is one of these compliant methods. A pre-note authorization is a $0 transaction for the vendor's routing and account number, which is sent to the vendor's financial institution. If it is accepted, the vendor's details are then deemed to be valid. So when do you need to produce a pre-note? A pre-note depends on your financial institution. Some of them require it, some of them do not require it. If they do require it, it could be because you've got a new or an amended vendor's bank account details. And some banks or institutions require a pre-authorization for high-value transactions. So depending on your financial institution who's doing your EFT payments, I'm going to run through how you can create a pre-note file for them. Orchid's EFT processing has an EFT format per bank, per type of file that you need to produce for that bank. For example, your domestic payments or your international payments, wire payments, positive pay, pre-notes, etc. A pre-note is just a different EFT format that you use for the payments that you're going to make. Each bank or financial institution has its own specification, and some of them may use the industry standard ones like NACHA. Contact Orchid for the EFT format to use for your particular bank. But in this example, I'm going to use the EFT format NACHA and NACHA pre-note. Both these formats produce the same file layout, and you use a configurable option on the EFT bank for the zero value in the file. So when would you use NACHA and when would you use NACHA pre-note? You would use NACHA with the pre-note option selected when you do not want to change the vendor's settings. For example, you notice you've got a high value transaction and you want to send a pre-note for that high value transaction, like a one-off. But you would use NACHA pre-note for new and amended vendors' EFT details. So because the vendor is configured to produce the NACHA pre-note, it's a reminder that you need to create a pre-note file for the vendor. But in this case, you need to change the vendor's settings after the pre-note is accepted. In order to work with the Nutcher and Nutcher prenote, on the AP vendor, you would configure those vendors that you want to do a normal payment. So these are existing vendors that you've done prenotes for before. They would be configured for the Nutcher EFT file format. And then for the new and amended AP vendors, you would configure them for the Nutcher prenote. And by default, on the EFT banks, for the Nutcher format, you would have the prenote set to N, and for the Nutcher prenote format, you would say that the prenote was set to Y. In this first example, I'm going to show you how to use the Nutcher prenote format for new and amended vendors requiring authorization. On the AP vendor on the Orchid EFT tab, you would set the file type to Nutcher prenote for new vendors or for vendors where you're amending the bank account details and you want to create a prenote file. Then when you create the AP payment, when you create and post the AP payment for these vendors, the next time that you run the EFT AP payment request screen, you will see all those vendors that require a Nutcher prenote. So you can select the Nutcher prenote file and click Generate. After doing this on the EFT files, you would download the prenote file and upload it to your bank. And once the bank confirms that the file details are okay for all the vendors in the prenote file, you would delete the EFT file. You will always have a record of the prenote file being downloaded and then deleted. Then you would go back to the AP vendor and change the EFT file format from Nutcher prenote to Nutcher, and then go to your EFT AP payment requests, select all the payments for the Nutcher format, generate the file. Then you would download it on EFT files, upload to the bank, and once confirmed, you would confirm the EFT file. Now we'll look at the recommended process for one-off payments requiring authorization. In this case, your AP vendor would be set to Nutcher because the vendor's bank account details would already have been approved. And once you have posted your AP payment, and maybe it's a high value payment, and you know it needs a prenote. So go to the EFT banks and on your file format, set the prenote option to yes. Then when you go to EFT AP payment requests, you would select those payments that you want to include in the prenote file and generate the file. And then on your EFT file list, you would download the file, then upload it into the bank, and straight away hold the file so you know that this file has been uploaded to the bank, but you're waiting for confirmation. When the bank confirms the vendor details are okay, you would go back to the EFT bank record and set the prenote option to N. Then back on EFT files, you would click refresh and then download that file and upload it to the bank. This new file will have the dollar values in. And once confirmed by the bank, you can click confirm on the EFT files. I have now shown you two methods that you can use to create the prenote files. Using the Nutcher prenote EFT file type on the vendor, you have a clear audit trail of the files created. One will be created with the file type Nutcher prenote, and one will be created with the file type Nutcher. And on the EFT vendor, as soon as you create a new vendor or make an amendment to their bank account details, changing the EFT file type to Nutcher prenote, it's a reminder when you come to making the payment that you need to create a prenote for that vendor and payment. The disadvantage for this type is once you have got the prenote confirmation, you would delete the prenote file to make the payments ready again to be included in a Nutcher file, and you need to select those payments twice, which is more error prone. But using the prenote flag yes and no on the EFT bank, the AP payments only need to be selected once. But on your audit trail, you'll have two files with the nutshell type, and if you look in the details, one says the pre-note option was yes, and one says the pre-note option is no, but it's a little less obvious on the EFT file list. And when you come to make the payments for these vendors, there's no reminder on which payments or vendors need a pre-note file. Another request we often have is, can I change the payment date in the EFT file? The EFT file format typically uses the entry date or today. The entry date is from the posting date on the payment record. Today is the current date and time of the server. You can change the EFT file format to use effective date instead of entry date or today. And the effective date is defined on the EFT file. And a quick reminder that you can always ask Orchid which file formats use effective date, or to make a change for your file format to use effective date. In my EFT file list, I have this file that was created on the 14th of May. And seeing so it's now the 15th of May, if I want to upload this file, the bank will reject it as the payment date is in the past. So what we can do is hold the file, and the status will become on hold. Change the effective date. Perhaps I want to make the payment on the 19th of May, and click refresh. And now we have a refreshed file. The history file has the effective date of the 14th of May, and the new file has the effective date of the 19th of May. So now when I download and upload to the bank, the payment date is the 19th of May. And finally, a quick word about configuring the security roles. You need to assign the EFT role to all the users as is appropriate. So those users who can view and amend the EFT file formats, the EFT banks, and for those users who have access to create EFT files and download EFT files on the AP or AR EFT payment request screens, or using the EFT file screen. But you also need some minimum rights in Sage Intacct. And we have documented here some of the error messages people have seen when they don't have sufficient security in Sage Intacct. These may be company permissions, GL permissions, or cash management positions. So have a look at the online help for the topic on Sage Intacct security roles required.
Thanks, Anne, for these very interesting tips on using Orchid EFT processing with Sage Intacct. So we'll finish with giving you a bit of an update on the roadmap for Orchid EFT processing for Intacct. We started about 6 months ago with support for AP payments and included AP advances in January 2023. In May 23, we will be releasing very shortly a new product update to support the EFT file creation for AR customer payments, as we've demonstrated in today's webinar. Next on our list of new features for Orchid EFT processing for Sage Intacct is support for SFTP, so that you can upload the files directly to the bank FTP site. Support for EFT processing for employee expenses. Additional security profiles. Exporting the EFT file creation to assist with reconciliation purposes, and screens to view various audit trails in Sage Intacct. We'll also look at the ability to email remittance advice.
For more information on EFT processing for Sage Intacct, please go to our website, where you will find brochures, videos, case studies, and will be able to download the software and training guides and other technical resources for EFT processing for Sage Intacct. Thanks for your time.